Hello there. Welcome to our first mini lecture, and we are going to start with definitions and parameters. Okay? Last week, we talked more about what geography is, and we will continue to play with those ideas because a lot of you have not had a geography class before. But this week, we're going to get more specific and define political geography. This lecture is just a very brief kind of overview, broad strokes of the beginnings, right? Of just kind of setting some parameters. There's obviously a whole bunch more readings down below, a bunch of videos for you to watch, for you to start wrapping your head around these ideas. Okay? So just to touch back on where we were, right? We talked about the fact that geography has two main branches. The first is the physical side of things, the environment, the plants, the animals, and it really focuses on, quote, natural landscape. Right? Then we have the human geography half, and that really focuses on where people are, how they live, how they arrange themselves, what do they do when they die, how does it vary from place to place. All of those human patterns are part of human geography. And then one of the things that makes geography so powerful, and the reason that it connects so many different disciplines, is that we have that overlap between these two things. Not only do we talk about the physical side of things, not only do we talk about the human or cultural side of things, we also talk about the interactions between people and the environment. And then there's that other piece of geography where we have geographic techniques and analysis. Okay, so that it's not a no man's land because it overlaps in both physical and human geography. Human geographers and physical geographers use these kinds of techniques and use the kinds of analysis. So when we're talking about these techniques, these are the kinds of things that I mean. The statistical geography, things like cartography, map making, GIS, remote sensing, those are the techniques where you actually have a tool and you are creating visualizations. Okay? So that overlaps both halves. And remember, there's the physical geography, and we will be talking about these things in this class in terms of resources, right? Where we have a lack of water or too much water, how does that affect politics? We will be talking about political geography and the environment, especially in terms of the US-Mexico border. So there's those aspects. We also have to have physical geography when we're just talking about the actual physical boundaries, when sometimes they're drawn with a river or a mountain range, or what do you do with a body of water? Where is the dividing line within that body of water? So there's definitely an intersection here between political geography and physical geography. And then there's the human side of things where political geography is, right? It lives here in human geography. And we also have these intersections with population. You need population to have politics, right? You have all of these other pieces. Economic geography is wrapped up in geopolitics and politics. So there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of interconnections. Okay? But let's start playing with what political geography is and defining it. So political geography is a wide-ranging subdivision of the discipline. It covers a great deal. Okay? It has a long and varied history. Some of it is positive, some of it is negative. There have been periods of time that geographers are not terribly proud of anymore, where political geography was used as an instrument of racism. Happily now we tend to look at it the other way, the fact that that racism very much affects political geography and the implications of that. But there have been some periods of time that were fairly dark periods of geography where it was really being used as a political weapon and to label people and to marginalize people. We've shifted focus and emphasis many times. At times, people were very, very focused on territory and how much land is controlled. Other times, they were focused on resources. Other times, people have been focused on movement of money. There's been a number of different kind of strategies or emphases. Okay? We will look at some of those shifts over the semester. For the moment, though, our goal is really to become more familiar with the range of ideas that geopolitical ideas involve, that political geography is really an umbrella over. Okay? So let's define it a little bit. First, just like with geography, and really like with any subdivision of geography, the definition you get depends on what kind of political geography you ask. Okay? So, are you a Marxist political geographer? Do you look at issues of power and capital and exploitation? Are you looking at critical geopolitics, where you are looking at the underlying messages and narratives and questioning everything? Are you looking at things from a feminist perspective or a queer perspective? There are qualitative political geographers that look at humans and patterns and emotions, and there are quantitative political geographers that do things like count number of people in a district or look at returns and voting policies or voting numbers. Right? So you can have all sorts of different things. There are people who do popular geopolitics, where they're looking at popular culture, and we will do some of that this semester. There's also marine political geographers that focus on those boundaries that I mentioned a few minutes ago. People who are involved in NGOs, non-government organizations, and human rights. I mean, there's a massive amount that you can cover with political geography. We're going to be looking at a subset of those. Okay. Some say it is a branch of geography that focuses on boundaries, divisions, and possessions. Okay, so boundaries like the wall between the U.S. and Mexico, the boundaries and the borders of, say, Europe here. Right? What does that look like? How has the map changed over time? Hong Kong, should Hong Kong belong to China? It's a piece of China, but at the moment they live under a one country, two policies model, but it's not working very well. So there's all of these questions about what belongs to who and how do we define that. That is definitely part of political geography. John Agnew, who is a famous political geographer, defines it as the study of how politics is informed by geography. So, in other words, thinking about politics and all of those things that it can entail, but thinking about it in terms of space, of where these things happen. So, for example, this is places that you could vote in Washington, D.C. in the last election. We have issues of space and place when we talk about whether Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. should be granted statehood. Their spaces have different rules than other parts of the United States. And we can talk about issues of fairness, we can talk about issues of resources and access, representation. All of those things take place in space. Okay? Here is another example of the way that geography is spatial. That geography is spatial. Well, it is. Okay? Clearly, this is the first lecture I'm recording this semester, and clearly I need to get back into using terms a little bit more clearly. I mean the ways that political geography is geographical, is spatial. Okay? These are gerrymandered districts in 4 different states. Does that look like there's any sort of consistency here? Does this look like there was an effort to be fair, an effort to arrange these territories, right? The space where these voters live? They are being grouped in ways to maximize one party's results over another. Right? Space, territoriality is being manipulated. That is hugely geographic, and it has political implications for who gets elected, who stays in office, who has the power, who gets to keep drawing these lines, right? Politics and space, politics and geography are deeply intertwined. But besides all those things, besides the traditional things that you may think of how many countries are there and where are their borders and all of those things, it also is the ways that we think about ourselves, portray ourselves, like Captain America. Right? He is a symbol of the United States and the way it represents itself, the way it reacts to other peoples. That is geopolitics. The issues of access to resources and who's going to control it and who gets those resources. Right now, as I'm recording this, there are news reports that almost President Biden, right, President-elect Biden, is going to end the Keystone Pipeline program. Well, that has a bunch of implications for our relationship with Canada and where that oil was coming from. Right? So that is geopolitical. There's also things like pandas, of all things. Pandas are actually hugely political because China controls them all and allows other countries to have them in places like zoos. But the Chinese government retains ownership of them. So even though we have several pandas in the National Zoo in Washington, D.C., those don't actually belong to the United States or to the zoo. They still belong to China. And China disperses the pandas as an effort at diplomacy, right, to create ties between the countries. But they are also making a statement by not just openly giving them to people. Okay? So that is political geography as well. There's the political geography, traditional kind of things, right, of diplomacy and wars, but there's also this kind of soft geopolitics, of softer approaches, things like comics and pandas. There's even this book, The Geopolitics of Emotion. So there are political geographers looking at the ways cultures of, as it says here, fear, humiliation, and hope. That's a really different way of looking at politics and geography than has traditionally been done, which has been so focused on land and on territory and on borders. And I actually have ordered this book. I haven't read it yet because I just discovered it this semester as I was updating my resources. But there's a huge range, obviously, right? This is the geopolitics of emotion. Where do emotions come into politics? How do different places, emotions, and approaches and worldviews affect the relationship between countries? All of this is part of political geography. So it's all of these things and more. We're going to see a huge range of ideas this semester, and I'm really excited to share them with you and walk through them with you. Here is another image to study and kind of work your head around. We have a whole bunch of things that contribute here. This is a drawing from one of the more popular political geography textbooks, An Intro to Political Geography by Jones. And you can see that there's the space and the territory, right? So we've got the geographic, the spatial, got place, territory, space, territory, and place over here. And here we have things that you might think of more as traditional politics, of things that you would study in a political political science class, right? Power, politics, and policy. But political geography unites them both, ties them together, and really helps you see the ways that things are interrelated and connected. So notice that all of these are part of this matrix, okay, part of this diagram. So think about that as you look at the resources that I've collected for you below, the readings. Keep an eye out for political ideas and geographic ideas, the way things intersect. Think about current events that might illustrate the concepts. In fact, that's going to be one of the things that you're doing for your assignment this week. And this is a really interesting time to be talking about political geography. So I'm looking forward to discussions. Let me know what questions you have.